Good morning. It is October 12th, 2020. It is Thanksgiving Day here in Canada. And I would like to just start off with acknowledging that if you're watching this today, I'm sorry that your celebration is is colored with the emotions of your grief today. It is always more difficult on days of celebrations. Well, I guess I shouldn't say always. I'm always talking about how um, everyone's experience is unique. However, these days do tend to be more difficult because one of the people that you love is missing. And it's a time to think about that. And I hope that you are taking time. If you're doing this today, you are taking time. I am Tanny Reed Walker. I am a counselor with FCSS in the Barons Eureka Warner area, so that's in southern Alberta, Canada. I have been a counselor with FCSS for a considerable amount of time, and I have come to realize that every single person will be having grief if they've experienced love. And so that very quickly became important to me to be able to talk with people and support people and walk with people on their grief journey. Today we are working on touchstone 3 of the 10 touchstones that Dr. Alan Wolfelt talks about. He talks about them in his book, Understanding Your Suicide Grief, and a smaller hardcover version, The Wilderness of Suicide Grief, Finding Your Way, which is a book full of all of the little chapters with each of the touchstones. It's really a nice thing to have in supporting this. So as I said, today is touchstone 3. So we will be exploring the uniqueness of your suicide grief. And actually there's a quote here that I want to read. It's just in the very beginning of the chapter. The most authentic thing about us is our capacity to create, to overcome, to endure, to transform, to love, and to be greater than our suffering. To be human is to suffer. Oh, that was Ben Oakrey. Sorry, I want to make sure I acknowledge the people that say the things. And now I forgot what I said before. My brain just goes a million miles a minute when I'm doing these. I just want to share everything that I can. We're going and I'll ground myself and bring myself back to the uniqueness of your suicide grief. Everyone who loves will grieve. It is one thing that connects us all as humans, is that grief and love. Those two things, I guess. And it doesn't matter how many other grief experiences you have had, a suicide grief experience is going to be different. This is a death that isn't in order. We have an idea of what orderly death is in our life. You're born, you live a good long life, and then when you're really, really, really old, then you die. That is the order. Grandparents die. Parents don't die. Children don't die. Teenagers don't die. Those are all what we consider out of order deaths. It's not true. People of any age can die. But in our minds, that is how the order goes. And so when it's out of order, it's extra difficult. When you're working through your suicide grief, please don't put a time limit on. And please don't run through it. There's no running. There is no gold star for speed. Take one day at a time. When you wake up in the morning, when you go to bed at night, you can assess how you're feeling and what's going on for you. Please don't judge yourself on what's happening. And always remember that even though there are often similarities and we all experience pain, your loss is unique to you completely, because your relationship with that person was unique to you. So let's go through the whys. Why is it unique? Number one, the circumstances of the suicide. The circumstances are different every time. And I'm going to list off all of the things that impact those circumstances for you. 1, the nature of the death is traumatic. So we already spoke about that a little bit. It is premature. It is sudden. It's shock. It's full of stigma and taboo. And we've spoken before in prior videos about what stigma and taboo are. And it can often result in numbing. You just don't even want to think about it. Potential why questions. Of course you're going to ask why. There's going to be all the questions. Why did it happen? Why now? Why me? Why them? I bet you can come up with a lot of whys because you've been experiencing this. Potential self-blame. I spoke before, not everyone blames themselves, but there is the potential to judge what your actions were, what your interactions were, what happened before. And sometimes people take responsibility. And it is not your responsibility, but sometimes it's natural to feel that. Not for everybody, though. Don't ever assume anyone's feelings. Potential investigation by law enforcement. Initially, suicide completions are often, look at me dancing around that, investigated by the police. They want to really decide what the cause of death was. When your heart is broken, it's very difficult, and it can be difficult if you were under suspicion. And I'm sorry that you're experiencing that. The potential focus on the act itself. People are going to be like, how did he do it? What happened? And they're going to ask questions. They wonder why too. And that complicates it. It's part of the circumstance and it's very hard. Multiple losses. You may not be the only one mourning the loss of that death. Your other family friends are going to be mourning that as well. And sometimes you will lose those important people for various reasons. And that just compounds the pain and the suffering. And support may be lacking, depending on your support community. How people perceive suicide, how people perceive you, how people perceive the person that died by suicide. All of those things impact the uniqueness of your suicide grief. And relationship cutoffs. Some people are just going to walk away from you, and it's going to be really surprising. And I'm very sorry that that happens. I've spoken many times about the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 are harmful, 1/3 are just neutral, and 1/3 are helpful. I wonder if it's still 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 with suicide grief. Perhaps something for me to look up. And potential discovery or witnessing the suicide. That's going to impact the uniqueness of your suicide grief. Sometimes people are the ones who have found the person who died. Sometimes people have seen the person die. And sometimes people are the ones who just find out. All of it is going to flavor it for you. It's going to change it. It's going to make it more unique. A potential autopsy. Not every death has an autopsy. And sometimes it can take a long time for those results to come back. And there's questions swirling around. It's going to impact the uniqueness of your suicide grief. Potential life insurance problems. Wouldn't it be easy if people were just understanding? But lots of insurance policies hold a time frame of 2 years, which tends to be the most. So if a person dies by suicide before 2 years, then the suicide policy is null and void. And there can be difficulties in getting the money when it's a suicide. And potential media coverage. We have some news and media outlets that really prey upon these losses. And it might be in the news. And that's really, really difficult. That's going to flavor the uniqueness of your suicide grief. All of these things combined can come out in so many different ways. It is understandable why it is unique to you. So please remember that you can reach out. You do not need to grieve alone. Even just one person in your world that will listen to you can have such an amazing impact on how you get through this, how you transmute. Why number 2, your relationship with the person who completed suicide. If this person was your soulmate, if this person was your best friend, if this person was your person and you were, for example, daddy's little girl and he died, all of these things are going to affect your own unique suicide grief. Your relationship with the person who died is so important. And if it's a conflictual relationship, or if there was mental health issues that were happening, or substance dependence, all of that is going to impact your suicide grief. That's a lot. If you helped that person out over and over again, and then they died anyway, that's going to impact your suicide grief. So take some time, please. The people in your life. So I mentioned a few times in the past about how some people will be helpful, some people will be harmful, and some people will be simply neutral. Sometimes we're surrounded, because of the complications of a suicide grief and the taboo and the stigma, sometimes people might find themselves very alone. Please don't stay alone. I have noticed that the reaching out for help is touchstone number 8, and I really am contemplating and probably going to do that one next. I'm going to mix it up. And you know what? Of course I should mix it up. That's how grief is. These aren't all linear. And I fully believe that you can reach out for help. So I'm going to do my next video on doing that. It's out of order, but suicide grief is out of order. Grief is messy and complicated, and you need support. So that's what I'm doing next week. Just a little heads up. Back to the people in your life. If you can find a trusted family member, a fellow survivor of a suicide loss, a friend, a clergy person, if they're supportive. If they're not supportive, please avoid that as well. Just find somebody who's supportive. And I know it can be very hard when you're in the middle of trying to just get out of bed in the day and try to figure out how to eat and breathe and not be numb or cry. Like, it's a lot to reach out. That's why I'm going to do the reach out one next week. So people who are judgmental, who are going to play into the taboo and stigma of suicide death, please avoid. Please, 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 please avoid. Yeah. Find people who are for you. They are the ones that you can be with. You might not have to avoid them in the future. I don't know. But for your sake, find people who are supportive of you. It is really important. And if you hear people saying things like, I'm there for you, you can carry on, keep your chin up, and they're like extra move forward kind of people, those are not your people. You can interact with them at a minimum. They seem like they're really cheery and like cheerleading you on. But you need people who are ready to go into the depths of it with you, who are ready to walk in the wilderness, who see the cave with you, and even though it's really scary, go, okay, I'll walk into the cave with you, and I'm going to bring a torch so that we can find our way out. And don't you worry, I'm here with you. Those people, those are your people. Why number 4? Your unique personality. Well, of course, how you are and who you are is going to impact your grief journey and the uniqueness of your suicide grief. If you're an extrovert, you might be the kind of person who is extrovert in their grief process. If you're an introvert and tend to be quieter, you might be more private and quiet about your grief process. I saw online recently a celebrity. I don't really pay attention to who they are, but they had lost their baby when the baby was born. Their baby died. And they posted all the feelings and all of the experiences. And there was a big backlash that they were doing that. But these people are celebrities, and they're naturally extroverted celebrities. So let them mourn and grieve the way they want to. It's their process. And so for you, it's your process. How you're going to do it is going to reflect who you are. You might shave off all your hair. You might want to post photos. You might want to do memorial things all the time. There's all kinds of things. Or you might just write in your journal and be quiet about it. I don't know. But that's your flavoring of your grief. You're going to do it your way. I know some people who want to have big bonfires as expressions of their grief, and other people who are just quietly whispering their sadness. And then there's a whole spectrum in between. He has a little box in his chapter about this, the personality types. The thinker is the personality that tries to stay in their head. They try to think about it. And sometimes they feel like having emotions is soft. I encourage you to go there, to the emotion part. You can think and think and think, but your emotions are important. You are important. You loved this person. You didn't just think you loved them, you loved them. The feeler. This person will be a person probably who cries a lot and expresses themselves a great deal. And sometimes people will call them overly emotional or very sensitive. You are unique and you are worthy and you are experiencing your grief in your way. Stay away from the judgment. And then we have the stoic, and that is the strong, silent type who sees that there's a barrier between them and what's going on. And if you find yourself as one of those people, please try to find a safe space where you don't have to be stoic. Because keeping it behind that barrier, it's just going to build and build, and it'll come out in some other way, and in the ways that are probably not going to be healthy for you. Why number 5? The unique personality of the person who died by suicide. Well, of course. No one laughed like they did. Somebody may in the family have a similar laugh, but no one laughed like they did. No one told jokes like they did. No one has the same stories from the same perspective that they did. No one lived their life. No one fulfilled that role in your life that they did. They are unique, and losing them is unique to you. They walked the way they walked. They looked the way they looked. They participated in whatever activities you did the way they did. And that is unique. And that is gone. And that's going to affect your suicide grief experience. 6. This one is, for me, a little bit awkward to talk about. It's gender. And I try to be very aware of not being a binary gender thinker. It is very pervasive in our society. So Dr. Alan Wilfeld talks about how that is reflected in our society. And so he talks about men and women. And I think that whatever gender you identify with, you will have your own unique, and it will flavor your own unique experience. But our society tends to see women as softer and men as harder, and men as people who should go back to work and ignore it and work their way through it, and women who should take the time to have support groups. It's the way our society is still. It's the very, very vast majority. But I'd be very interested to know how the LGBTQ plus community works through their suicide grief, because I know that it is one of the larger populations total wise that have suicides, and I would be really open to anybody who is willing to talk to me about that and maybe help me look for some resources to have more conversations about this. Whatever your identity is and however society sees you, they might have expectations of how you're going to experience this, and please don't let anybody subscribe that to you. This is your journey, your unique journey. 7. Your cultural, ethnic, religious, and spiritual background. That covers a lot. In the past, we've spoken of this before, a lot of religions, again, see suicide as taboo and there is stigmatized. However, I feel like there is a lot more understanding and compassion in a great deal of religions, ethnic cultures. It's still new for that stuff. So please find people that are open and willing to support you. And if you need to take a rest from some of your traditional behaviors, activities that you would normally participate in while you're working through your unique suicide grief, that's okay. You're not abandoning your culture. You're not abandoning your faith. You're not abandoning your spirituality. You're walking through the cave and trying to figure it out. And that's okay. Please take care of yourself. Whatever you believe about suicide, you still have the permission to mourn. You still will experience grief because you loved that person. So please take care of yourself. Why? Number 8. Other changes, crises, or stresses in your life right now. Well, Usually, when a death happens, our lives are already complicated. I have a big family. There's always something going on. And when a sudden death happens, any death, but especially a sudden traumatic out of order death happens, that stuff doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And sometimes it's compounded. So that really means you've got to try to find ways to take care of yourself. And that is hard because you are most likely overwhelmed right now. So take a look at some of the things in your life and try to decide, can these be put on hold? Can these be delegated? And where am I going to dedicate time for myself daily? Ooh, that's hard. But it's so necessary because life doesn't stop. It just doesn't. People still have jobs. They have to make money. They have to pay their mortgages. Oh my gosh, we have to go grocery shopping. Cars break down. Relationships break down. Children get sick. The elderly get sick. We get sick. All these other things can and will happen. So it will make your grief experience unique. Sometimes we have to kind of put it on the shelf a little bit. Please don't put it on the shelf for a long time. And if you do put it on the shelf, take it down and dust it off. You can dose yourself. Dose yourself with those grief moments. Number 9. Your experience with loss and death in the past. You might be somebody who's never experienced a loss. You might be somebody who's experienced 10 losses in the last year. You might be somebody who's experienced a few losses over their life. All of these things are going to impact your unique experience with the loss. So be patient with yourself. And don't compare yourself to other people because you are unique. And you are going through this in your own way, learning your own things, and trying to understand. Number 10, your physical health. If you were ill and somebody has died by suicide, it can really impact how you experience this. You might be just trying to get over your illness and it's kind of put to the back of your brain until you get better. Or it might make it worse because you're just so tired. There's all kinds of things that can happen with your physical health. So please understand that that is also going to impact the uniqueness of your suicide grief. So when you go through all of these things, does it not explain why we are all different and we all experience everything differently? Yeah, it totally does. So my biggest hope in talking about this touchstone is that you have compassion for yourself. Please take care of you. Please do not compare yourself to other people. And please find a support person. Even just one is really powerful. Because you are worth it. You are worth learning. You are worth the time. And you are worth working through that. Your life is worth it. Thank you again for being with me today. And if you know of anybody that could use these words and support, please share this video. The videos are also on YouTube, FCSS 2020. And again, I welcome comments, I welcome emails, I welcome messages, and I hope that you are kind and compassionate to yourself and to others. I'll see you next week.